funding so that we can do programs like this. Secret lives of buildings and their lovers. So one of the speakers we had was like, I don't really like this and their lovers thing. And I was like, no, we're the lovers. Like we want this for people who love buildings to come. There's nothing risque about what we're going to do.
Not the secret lovers.
And if you want to know about the other programs, we have a program guide, the next 3 that are occurring. The next one will be in August. And I will be speaking. The other thing is we ask that everyone complete an evaluation form. It really helps us understand the appeal of programs like this. It's one of the requirements that we have for our grant is to evaluate our programs to see if we're actually doing the things that we've promised that we're doing the things that we have promised. So tonight we have Jared Anderson, who is the curator and collections manager from the Bartholomew County Historical Society. I will be up next talking about a doctor, a mayor, and 2 artists. And then we're going to sort of shift and we're going to do a couple of workshops. And the first workshop it will be about how to actually do research on a historic house. And so as we're still in the planning phase for it, but what we imagine is that we will have some folks to help with some genealogy, with maps, with all the different kinds of resources that you would need to consult to research your, I don't want to exactly say your own home. I'm going to say your own home if it was built before 1950. Because that's where we at the library have our best resources. And then in October, we're bringing Sarah Marsom back to town. She does a lot of historic preservation, and she is going to be leading a workshop on how to share the histories or share the stories about where you live or your family. She's really creative, innovative, and if you've been to some of our other programs, she was here last year for our Tiny Henry Moore workshop. She does these little dolls. So keep those in mind. And as I say, there's a flyer in the back. And the other thing that I just wanted to plug is this Saturday at 11 at the Commons, we are doing a celebration for John Tingley. It would have been his 100th birthday on Sunday, and we are going to be showing a couple of films that were made here in Columbus featuring Tingley talking about his work and the conditions in Columbus. The program starts at 11. Each film is about 20 minutes, so the first 40 minutes of the programs will be films, and then afterwards for another 40 minutes or so, the chaos will just be running and for people to stop in. And we're going to switch to Mr. Anderson. Adobe could really improve if they stopped asking me. That would be honestly the best thing ever. Thank you, Jared.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to start by saying, feel free as I'm going along. You can shout out questions, thoughts, commentary. Just no insults. I don't really like those. But yeah, I want this to be as conversational as possible. I think we all learn better that way. So just going back and forth. So yeah, I work at the Bartholomew County Historical Society. I'm the curator and collections manager. We have a collection of about 100,000 artifacts in the collection. On top of that, I also take care of the exhibits and I assist with some of the programming that we do. My background is I've got a bachelor's in history, bachelor's in historic preservation, and a master's in public history from Southeast Missouri State University. I'm originally years ago, and just recently I moved down to Madison, Indiana. So, but I work here every day, and then I voyage home. And I've worked at museums in 4 different states, Illinois, Missouri, Louisiana, and Indiana. So, I want to start with just a brief history of the Historical Society, so we can kind of remain grounded in who we are as an organization. So yeah, we were organized April 3rd, 1921 during Bartholomew County's centennial celebration that year. Though, according to our records, it suggests that the founders of the organization started collecting about 1915, 1916. And those founders were George Pence, Vida Newsom, Hugh Miller, J.R. Dunlap, W.G. Irwin, W.H. Newsom, Daniel Richards, and Yondell Klein. Now, Hugh Miller, it seems, was W.G. Irwin seemed to be the basically my counterpart, who I am at the Historical Society. He would go and gather as much as he could. And we've got all of his letters detailing him reaching out to people, not just around the region, but around the state and around the Midwest, trying to get artifacts for the collection in those early days. From there, we began displaying artifacts in the basement of the courthouse in 1927. So it took several years just to get enough artifacts to then display. From there, we purchased the McEwen-Samues-Marr House in 1968, and we'll dig into this a little bit more. It took several years of rehabilitation to be able to move a museum in there, close to 10 years. Then BCHS acquired the Henry Breeding Farm north of town in 1982. And out of curiosity, who all has been to the museum? Okay, well that's a pretty good. Normally it's the opposite. There's only 4 or 5 hands and a few people that have. How many people have been out to the breeding farm? Okay, I'll take that. That's pretty good too. And then in 2021, we celebrated our 100th anniversary alongside the county's bicentennial. So when I was studying in school, specifically with my preservation work, we learned how to read a building. How do you go up to any random building on the street, and how do you sort of digest what you're looking at, okay? So we're going to do that. We're going to do that together. What are some of the things that you guys see with this property? Feel free to shout them out. Chimneys, yeah. There's 4 of those. 2 on this side, 1 on the back, and 1 on the other side.
The fence, the iron fence.
The fence, we'll definitely detail that. That's a key feature. Any idea what the style of the house is? Italianate. Though it wasn't always Italianate, and we'll talk about that. Any other features that you see that are eye-catching or important? The porch, yeah.
Across the top, I don't know what that's called.
Yep, so that's a lintel.
Lintel.
The little pieces above all the windows. So yes,
It's brick.
it's brick. Yeah, that's simple. Simple but important.
Yeah.
Okay. So we try to start at the bottom or at the top and go to the bottom. So there is the chimneys. That's a notable feature. I guess first, built in 1864. So the Civil War was coming to an end, and they decided to build this house. Though not what it looks like here. Again, we'll get to that. Italianate style, originally federal. So if you can see, there's really the 3 sections of the house. There's this front section, there's a section that's elongated that comes out, and then there's that back section. Do you notice anything different with the windows in the back? Well, the bottom ones are rounded windows. So, truth be told, that's the oldest part of the house. It would have been offset from the road, and that was the first name, McEwen, that was his house. And then from there, the rest was added on later by the Samuels family. And again, we'll get to that, yeah. So when it was just that back portion, it was a federal style house. Likely, the corners wouldn't have been near as decorative. There's a sense of fenestration both with the federal style and the Italianate style. Though, I will say, fenestration was often used to create a big imposing structure. You stand there, you look up in awe, and traditionally, the windows actually get bigger as you go up, or smaller as you go up. These are actually about the same. We measured them, because we were like, I don't know, maybe there is a little bit of fenestration going on there. It's actually not, it's not an illusion. They're almost the same size on bottom and top. About 6-inch difference. And let's see, we've got the brackets. Brackets, that's a big detail with Italianate. Again, the bracketing wouldn't have been near as prominent when it was a federal style home. It would have been a very flat face of the home. You've also got the awning in the front over here on the first section of the house. And we'll get to that as well. That's an interesting and key feature. Foundation is stone. We have curved front steps. Again, the iron canopy. And let's see, anything else I'm missing? So yeah, and then we'll get to more and more how they constructed. So this is how we view the timeline of the McEwen-Samues-Marr house. Now again, I didn't have to create this, it's very self-explanatory. But there's a reason for it. So, McEwen-Samues-Marr, MBCHS, that's us, that's why we're there now. However, there's a lot more to the building than what meets the eye. This is actually a more accurate timeline. So you have the native population, which we'll get into. General John Tipton then owned the property. From there, it became the Liberty Meeting House. And then you have the house built, McEwen House. Then it's added on to by the Samuels. Then the Marrs lived there. And then a whole slew of people in relatively short amount of time came through there. The Mathises there for a few months, the Jones there for a few years, the Rogers for a few years, and then about 3 or 4 other owners. And then it got turned into a boarding house. And that's when hundreds of people through the years, when it was a boarding house, would come in and out of the property. That's when the records get a little hairy. There's a lot of little apartments in the building at that point, and a lot of people that are attributed to the property. So it goes from the McEwens, the Samuels, the Marrs, and then it just explodes as far as records go. And they're a little hairy to try to navigate. And then from there, we of course purchased it in 1968, the Historical Society. So before the house, it's pretty well documented that in this area, there's been native peoples found, their artifacts have been found, there's been burials found. The inn had found human remains in the 19-teens. The new probation building, they found some graves there, all of which are linked to the native population. You know, we're right by the river, and it was a hotbed of indigenous peoples. So in this area, through the Treaty of St. Mary's, there's several local indigenous tribes, including the Miami, the Delaware, the Way, the Potawatomi, and others. George Pence, who, if you remember, was one of our founders, he wrote in depth about the local native populations, though he really dug into Delaware, which was also known as the Lenape. And there's a lot of evidence, again, that they were in this area, they were downtown, as well as other places. And obviously it wasn't downtown at that point. But I think it's important to start with that because this area was really heavily populated by these tribes. So then from there we dig into the Liberty Meeting House, 1829. So It was erected on Lot 19 of the original plot of Columbus, and formerly owned by General John Tipton. Mr. Tipton is up there, founder of the county, naming it Bartholomew County after Joseph Bartholomew, someone he served with in the military. And several community members came together to start the Liberty Meeting House and school. It was used as a schoolhouse and for religious meetings, regardless of the denomination, which is interesting for this time. Shortly thereafter, you start seeing churches sprout up that are really their own denomination. But this was a little bit more loose with that, if you will, though it was primarily Methodists and Presbyterians that occupied it. And it's the first organized school building in Bartholomew County. Okay, so then William McEwen and family come along. He's a handsome devil, as you can see. So they purchased the property. At that point, there's nothing on the property. Though that seems to be contested. Some records state that the school was still there. Others say it was long gone by that point. Purchasing it in 1864 for $150, a huge deal, and he constructed a 2-story federal-style home, which, if you remember looking at the picture, let's see, right here. And truth be told, initially, going through the National Register nomination, spoiler alert, this building is on the National Register. Initially, I was of the belief that this central part was the original house, and they built forward and built backward. But I've got several things that prove otherwise in the presentation. So, McEwen was known for being a self-made man, as self-made as you can be at the time. Moving to Columbus, that's supposed to be 1852, not 1952. And he organized the Kentucky Stock Bank. He served as their president until 1872. He had quite the tenure. McEwen's sons later joined the bank, and it would be named McEwen and Sons Bank. So, from there we have a massive bank failure. One of the only bank failures in Bartholomew County history up to fairly recent. So 1870, he was overextended, he had a lot of open accounts, and he would go bankrupt later that year. Because of the bank failure, the city of Columbus lost $17,000, the county lost $27,000. He became a laughingstock. The community, he became infamous. He was well known, good businessman, good banker, became very infamous because he really screwed a lot of people out of a lot of money. So approximately $1 million today, which is a young, thriving community, and bam, that happens. People lose money left and right. It was 2 years before McEwen and the affairs were settled, and in 1872, he'd sell the property to the Samuels family. Now, thinking about, he's pretty well off. He's got a bank. His sons are involved, but still, the house wasn't that big. It wasn't until the Samuels family, which nearly tripled the size of the house, and we'll get to that here. So David Samuels and family. The Samuels family came to Bartholomew County in 1852 from Poland. The son, Samuels, arrived shortly before his father and engaged in peddling until 1854. So they're here well before they purchased the property. But when they purchased it in 1872 from William McEwen, they heavily remodeled the house. And what you see today is what you would have seen when the Samuels lived there. That's what it was brought back to when they purchased it in the 60s. So it redesigned the outside from this antiquated federal style. At that point, it was kind of on its way out, and Italianate was a new thing. And they wanted to be part of the new thing in town. So the Italianate style came about. They added 3 parlors, which you can still clearly see in the museum today. You walk in, you're in one parlor. Across the way, there's another parlor. In our front room that has wood floors, we call it the wood room. and that would have been the third parlor. From there, they had an entry hall. If you were to go in the front door, which we don't go in that door anymore, that would be the front entry hall. And from there, there's the big, beautiful staircase right there in the entry hall. And then upstairs, they built a master bedroom with a sewing room. Diane, I'm actually fairly certain that's your office. And then there's 2 bedrooms up there, which is now just one long gallery if you've been to the museum. So the Samuels were merchants. They dealt in a lot of different types of business. The Samuels and the Vogel family, who were also both Jewish families, which is notable, they created a small grocery business in 1854. So you have to think, David, the father, and the rest of the family are on their way to America, sailing from Poland. And Sam Samuels and other folks in town, mostly Jewish, are coming together to create this business. In 1862, father and son, David and Samuel Samuels, in partnership with another man, they built a woolen mill in Columbus. And 4 years later, they left the partnership and went to St. Louis, where they built another mill. Keep in mind, at this point, they still don't own this house. So they go off to St. Louis, build a mill that was supposedly the largest mill west of the Alleghenies. And it failed. It was not a successful venture. They then returned to Columbus, and using the money that they still had, they purchased full ownership of the Trade Palace, their store, back from their associates. And then, again, because this is important, and I'll show you why, the Samuels and their faith. The Samuels were, again, one of many, many Jewish families. There were dozens of Jewish families in the 1870s to the 1890s, many Jewish merchants downtown, 10 or 11. And I know some of you attended, I did a Jewish history talk, tour of downtown. Oh goodness, when was that, last year? And we really got to dig into that. So it was really interesting discovering all of these things. And then discovering that it traces back to where I work, the building I work in. So yeah, there were many Jewish merchants during this period along Washington Street. Only one of those Jewish merchants survives today, though not downtown. Any idea who that Jewish merchant is? Cruz. And that's a little past their time, early 1900s. But of that core Jewish group, that's the only Jewish business that is still around. A Jewish synagogue was moved a few blocks to where it's located on this Sanborn map. This Sanborn map is from 1886. And let's see, if you look, can you see the Jewish temple? It's off on the right. Yep, and it says Jewish temple right on top. So if you go up, you can see 524 3rd Street, and our property is there. If you see J.R. Gentico Flour Mill, it's to the right of that, and that's our property today. And what's interesting, the house and everything is still there. All the outbuildings that are present there are gone, and we'll dig into that a little bit more here shortly. But this area was, no one has officially called it this, but what I often refer to this area as was, it was a small Jewish ghetto of sort, where you have the temple, you have the Samuels living catty corner across 3rd Street. You also have several other members of the Samuels family living right by the Jewish temple. And then there's another Jewish individual that lives on, I guess, this quadrant of the bottom section. So there's records that suggest that they gather quite frequently and oftentimes eat, celebrate, and worship in both the McEwen-Samues-Marr House and some of these other properties. Now, of course, that entire block is gone now. It's all just a parking lot. The Jewish temple was there until, I believe, the early 70s, and it was demolished. It was a little, it just looked like a little house, but it was the Jewish temple. So we've actually got a photo of it. The green books, if you've ever seen those. So yeah, and then from there we've got James Marr. So we've done McEwen, we've done Samuels, and now James Marr, where it's sort of humorous. You know, he was a farmer, and he wanted to retire from that lifestyle, and he retired to the city. You know, the big thriving city of Columbus in the 1880s, 1890s. So later, his wife, Mrs. Marr, would die in the home. About a year, some say about 2 years after they moved. So shortly after she passes, but he stays in the house for a relatively long period of time. And from there, it would later pivot to his son, and then it was sold to the Mathis family. Now, Mr. Marr had a Model T. He loved that Model T. And how do we know that? He kept meticulous records, all of which we have in the collection, that really speak to just how much he cared. All of his mileage, his gas usage, every part he ever had to order, it's all written down very meticulously. And you can still see a change that he made to the property today by going to our carriage house. There's a wood door, though we don't believe that's the original wood door, but he purposely put in a door so he could park his Model T in the carriage house. So yeah. So then there's kind of this shuffle period where, again, within 10, 15 years, you get a lot of action, a lot of people going in and out before it's ultimately turned into a boarding house. So, following the Marr family, Noah and Anna Mathis, they owned the property for only 4 months. We don't know why. We don't know why they moved on. But they purchased it from William Marr for $5,500. So it went from McEwen's $150 for the property to over several decades. Now we're in the 1920s, and it's $5,500 for the property and the house. Following that, we don't know much about the Mathises. Again, they weren't there for too long. The Jones family, Harry and Alta Jones, they moved in. They were living just right across the street, 535 3rd Street to 524 3rd Street. And Harry was the brother to former Columbus Mayor Frank Jones. There's records that suggest that Frank and the rest of the Jones family, they hung around the house quite frequently. They were there regularly. And because he was brother to the mayor and then later former mayor, they were always in the period or the social pieces in the newspaper. So we can kind of follow their time there pretty closely. Anyone that went to the house for dinner, any clubs that were hosted there, and they were involved in a lot, all that's written down. So we do know all of that. So yeah, just some of the meetings from their time from 1921 to 1924, the Columbus Domestic Science Club, Friday Parcheesi Club, and the Republican Party meetings with Frank Jones. And what's interesting here, and we'll kind of go into this on the next slide, but you see that the property is sold to, well, this is actually an article from a poultry farm saying that the Jones moved to the poultry farm and Rogers moves to 524 3rd Street, the McEwen-Samues-Marr House. They basically do a property swap, and I guess, unlike Marr, they wanted to move out to the farm, so they do. And C.E. Rogers moves into the home. And what's interesting is Harry C. Jones is also the president of Columbus Abstract Company. I don't know, Tricia, do you have anything from the Columbus Abstract Company in your? Yeah, well, we don't either. It'd be really interesting to see if someone does, but we do. Okay, so then you have the Rogers family and 3 other families. Again, they changed quickly. And this time is really just kind of hairy. There's some records that suggest when Jones was there, he put in some apartments. So you kind of see a decade where do these apartments and the precursor to the boarding house, where does it actually fit into the timeline? So again, Rogers did that property swap. C.E. Rogers had previously been manager of the Crump for close to 20 years. I believe it was 17 years, which is just kind of a neat little side story. And again, that's where the records start getting a little hairy. What's interesting, Rogers would later join business with a shoe knower. And it appears as though they attempted to create a car company, and it didn't work. There's very few mentions of it in the newspaper, but it's like they joined forces and then it fell flat on their face. And then from there, 3 other families came in. There's a lot of people that start cycling in and out of the house, and that's when we hit the boarding house days. And that happened from about the 1930s to the 1950s. Hundreds of individuals cycled in and out. It was oftentimes lower income individuals, and the area hit a time of extreme disinvestment. You have to think, at that time, urban renewal, in a sense, starts happening. Downtown starts clearing block after block after block of historic neighborhoods and things like that. Thankfully, this house wasn't slated for that, but by the 1960s, you're losing a lot of blocks of historic properties near downtown. And truthfully, this property, and I'll show you the photos, I'm shocked that they didn't come for it. So yes, there was extreme disinvestment. The hallways were real tight. We've had people who have come in and said that my relative lived in that house, and they said it was like a rabbit's nest. If you go and look today, some of these rooms were split with walls into 4 little rooms. I mean, there were several families living there at once, and again, they weren't there for long, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. And in the newspaper records, by the time you start tracking a family, they're gone, a new family's in. So yeah, there were a lot of temporary inhabitants, and this photo is just from the 90s, but just goes to show how it's a fairly big house at the time, and so they were able to pack a lot of people in there. And then just another interesting side note, Bartholomew Beverage Company was located in the building during the boarding house days. And initially we thought that was a little odd, but it appears as though they were either in a building that was still there in the rear, or they were in the, what is my office, the very back part of the building. Also one of the oldest parts of the building. And so, we don't know their exact location, but we do know they were there. There's all of these ads, they say 524 3rd Street, and that's us. So, they really appear from the 40s to the 50s. From there on, Bartholomew Beverage is still around. It's a supplier or a distributor for Anheuser-Busch products today. And they're out on 840 Depot. And yeah, so all of these ads through the years, I mean, they're really quite creative in the 40s and the 50s. So there's numerous samples of those. Let's see. And then we end up purchasing the house, the Historical Society. At that point, it had been vacant for several years. This is one of the photos either when it was getting ready to become vacant or real early on in the 60s. And it doesn't look terrible, right? I mean, it's a little run down, but not terrible. And however, it was seriously blighted. I mean, broken windows, vandals had broken in, major roof issues causing the crumbling of the plaster on the interior. There were mold issues reported, and a major fire hazard because windows were gone, people could break in. And again, I'm shocked it didn't burn to the ground or anything else. So now I've just got a bunch of photos showing what it was before the Historical Society bought it. These ones aren't the best, but you can start to see the front windows are boarded up. We start off good. These are the good ones. From there, you start to see that there's just it just looks kind of like an ominous vacant building. Now the back. That's not at all what the museum looks like today. When it was a boarding house, they put a cinder block addition onto it, and so you've got the carriage house with the doors, and now there's that breezeway through there to get to the front of the property, the front of the house. They basically bricked that in and then put cinder block above that. And so again, there were all these random rooms created in this process. And yeah, it's just very bizarre because it doesn't look anything like that today. Okay, now you start to see it. Windows covered up. There's several windows in the far left photo that the windows are gone. There's just nothing there. There's trash heaped up. Just kind of a gnarly place. You probably wouldn't have wanted to be there. Then the Historical Society steps in. Again, we purchased it in 1968, and they get right to work. I say right to work. They had to fundraise. They had to get the money to do this. And so it took several years. The first exhibits were actually just in the main rooms, the main two rooms as you walk in. And that was it. Everything else was untouched when they opened it. And that was 1972, 1973. So, I mean, you're talking 4 or 5 years, and it's just a few rooms that are done at that point. But you can notice, all that cinder block is gone. I mean, they stripped it all back. They took it back to what it would have been when the Samuels family was living there. You start to see some of the fencing in some of these photos. You see that it's kind of dense, it's out of whack. And that's the original fence. We still have that today. So they were able to stabilize that. If you've been in the museum, you know that there's a ramp in the back. That would have been a little patio of some sort at that point. So yeah, these are done late 60s, early 70s. And then we have the official dedication of the new BCHS museum. And that's 1976, in line with the bicentennial back here. The community really did a lot for that. There were parades, there were gifts given. It was popular for people to, organizations to give community gifts to other organizations. We've received some of those donated to us. For example, there were paintings given to the Foundation for Youth. Those paintings have now been given to us, so we've got those. But on the back, they're written, Bicentennial Gift, 1976. So there was this real sense of camaraderie, and it was the perfect time to open the museum at that point. So, some of the speakers that day, you got the dedication program. Some of the speakers were Ross Crump, Suzanne Jones, and Barbara Stewart, Bob Stewart's wife, Mayor Bob Stewart, though he wasn't mayor at this point. But, and so the speech, I don't know if you can read that, but without the dedicated support of many friends, the museum and its programs would be just another beautiful daydream. It is therefore my honor to present this plaque as a recognition to the following who have generously supported the Historical Society and its mission, or in its museum, sorry. So there were 100 plus large donors, and they're all listed in that program. You had everyone. You had all the large industries, Cummins, Arvin, Hamilton Costco, Burnco. They all came together, donated a lot of money, and then all of these major families in town as well. J.I. and Senior were in attendance. They donated quite a bit of money just to get the museum, the property, retrofitted into what it is today. What's interesting, again, we were talking about community gifts. In 1976, it appears during that celebration, which it would have started in mid-75 to the 4th of July, 1976, we received over 8,000 artifacts for the collection that year. I don't know if they did a drive, I don't know if they, but our records show a lot of the stuff we have came between the sesquicentennial in 71 to the bicentennial in 76. That was a really hot period for our collection, and it grew extensively during the early 70s. Okay, so then 50 years since the dedication. That'll be next year, though, again, it's been occupied by us for a little longer than that. But next year will be the 50th anniversary of the official dedication of the property. And the home was placed on the National Register in 78, so they got it open, got people through the door, and then they worked on that. And the only changes to the outside, really, an 80-day ramp, former exposed stairway in back became enclosed, a metal roof as opposed to slate, would have been slate, and I think it was probably just regular shingles, and then sometime they put in the metal roof. And then, we continue to maintain the property today. One of the more recent things we've done is we recently redid that porch area, and it's looking great. I encourage you to come look at it. And yeah, we've got a lot of exciting projects to come with the property, including, next few slides, are some exciting updates that we're doing. Maybe not necessarily to the house, but to the property as a whole. So, in honor of our first Chuck Taylor Day that we are hosting this year, we have poured a small patch of concrete on the front of the property where we are actually installing a large fiberglass Converse All-Star. And so we're trying to look at how do you expand outside of the walls of the museum. That's great. We have this beautiful property. How do we make it so that people don't just come, but they want to come instead, and they want to do things around the museum? It's a beautiful property, so how do we get them to do that? So we've got this. It should be, fingers crossed, installed by early June for Chuck Taylor Day. Another exciting update, we've got a glass overhead door being installed in the carriage house. Now, before you panic, we are keeping the wood doors. The wood doors can open up, and then behind that will be a glass garage door. So we can open those up, we can display things, put a carriage, put a Model T, put things in the carriage house. It's also a great opportunity for education programs. We can, again, expand outside of our property, outside of our footprint. So we've got that coming, and they've also recently poured concrete there. So there's some really cool things in the works, including the last exciting update. Though this won't be permanent, we do have a Exhibit Columbus installation. I believe they're going to start installing in July, and called the Steel Horsey. It will be behind the building, and kind of in honor of where the railroad used to come through. A play off of that is going to feature things like some of the work that they did to First Christian Tower. Some of the panels that were taken from that will be installed in it. There will be just many different components that kind of play off the precursor to that area, the railroad coming through, and then kind of an homage to what came, the modernist movement. So this should be really exciting, and works great with the new garage door that we're getting, so you can do programs in there, and you'll see that. Okay, so then just some more detailed work about the McEwen-Samues-Marr House. And this stuff is just kind of getting into the weeds a little, but it's interesting stuff, I promise. So, the iron canopy above the front door. It was designed by L.L. Levering, and potentially produced by Madison Iron Works, which is interesting because a lot of the iron work done in town was not done by Madison Iron Works. But according to the newspaper, a man, John W. Adams, came from Madison to put a galvanized iron canopy over the front door of the residence of Mr. Sam Samuels. And it was designed by L.L. Levering, who was a local architect. And again, it's interesting because at that point, they also installed the fence. And that was done by B. Bush, a local ironworks. So we don't know that it was done by Madison Iron Works, but we also believe that it would have stated B. Bush, because at that time, when the fence came in, they said B. Bush. We are assuming that because he came from Madison to install, he brought it with him from Madison. And at that point, that was one of the only ironworks they had. One of the only ironworks we had at that point was B. Bush. From there, though, our ironworks manufacturing really grew. And we got Caldwell and Drake, Corning and Sweeney, Dunlap, and later Golden Foundry. So many of the ironwork projects that you see around town, they were often, you can look in the newspaper and there's these bids between all of them. They used to publish, everything. So they'd say, B. Bush said that, they quoted the courthouse, for example. They put a fence around the courthouse that's no longer there. B. Bush quoted them this. Madison Iron Works quoted them this. And I believe actually B. Bush won that one. But at that point, you didn't have as much competition. It later came about that by the late 1800s, you had a lot more. In the early 1900s, it really ballooned. And I also just wanted to note, architecturally speaking, it's all straight lines. It's all very linear, except for the front wall, or this front awning mount. That's the only part that's kind of curved, and I just think that's a little interesting. Now, does anyone else know other properties L.L. Levering did in town? Because there are several that still stand. So there was First Presbyterian Church, 1885, and then, thanks to David Seacrest, he kind of pulled this together, that shows Schwarzkopf's, Crump, and the Mrs. Cobb building, 1883, 1882, and 1881, right in a row there, that Levering design. So it's unique that we, just a small, I say small, a home in town has this design feature from a semi-notable architect. Another side note that's kind of interesting, L.L. Levering's son would later go and star in movies in Hollywood. He became a Hollywood actor, so. And he was born in Hope. L.L. Levering was born in North Carolina. His son was born in Hope. Okay, brick patterns. So again, I mentioned, how can we tell that this is different from the rest of the house? The brick pattern back in the back part, the rear of the building, I say Flemish bonding-esque because traditionally Flemish bonding is long way, short way, long way, short way. That's not what they did. They did several long ways and then a row of short all the way across. And they didn't do that on the front building. So aside from the curved windows, the front also doesn't have many of the short ends. They do in some spots, and I think it was because of repairs that were done over time. But by far, the old part has that Flemish-ish bonding, and then the running bond is on the rest of the property. B. Bush and Sons fence. Now, real fast with B. Bush and Sons, local and regional ironworks in the latter half of the 1800s. Have you ever seen any of B. Bush's work in town? Because there's several. Though, I believe we might have one of the last B. Bush fences. The the Overstreet House had a B. Bush fence, and that is no longer. At one point, the courthouse had a B. Bush fence. That's gone. There's several houses on Franklin and Lafayette that have old iron fences. None of them are B-Bush. I only know that because we've looked. Going and analyzing every piece of iron on these. So yeah, and that red, down here on the bottom right, those are everywhere. Maybe not red, but they're painted, and they're everywhere. Columbus has several downtown. Again, we really only have the storefronts. We used to have a lot of fences. Now we have, I believe, the only fence. And these storefronts are everywhere. One was actually just ruined and taken out of this block. Yep, on the Mrs. Cobb building, it was hit by a car, someone going down the alley, just about 6 months ago, so that's now gone. But there's still a few B-Bush storefronts in the downtown area, and they're really all over the region. Now, one of their competitors that they would have had to compete with is Mesker Bros. Anyone ever heard of Mesker Bros? I had to include that. I had to geek out a little bit about the Mesker Bros. They were out of Evansville. They did storefronts all across the country. There's no joke, there's a Facebook page of people tracking Mesker Brother fronts. I mean, people love their storefront. We have one in downtown. By far, we have more B-Bush than Mesker Brothers, but the fact that we have one, it is notable, and we're tracked on the master list of Mesker Brother fronts. So here's our fence, again, B-Bush, and what's interesting, we've got a postcard in the collection, a drawing of a fence, and it's the exact same fence that we have in front of our property. Down to the detail work, the hearts that are in the ironwork, it's the exact same. And then again, you see B-Bush and Sons, Columbus, Indiana. So yeah. Okay, and then real fast, I just wanted to talk about some of the other buildings that used to be on the property. So this is from the 1870s. It's not a great photo. I wish I could go back in time and scold the person that took this photo because they cut off the front of the house. Like, just moved over just a half an inch, but that's okay. So you can see we've got the carriage house. It's connected at that point. I don't believe it was always connected. I actually think the Samuels connected it when they redid the property. Behind there, you see, really there's 4 buildings. You can't really see them, but they're there, trust me. There's those 4 buildings. Then if you move on to 1910, this is even harder to see because there's a lot of activity in here. A lot of buildings were built in the early 1900s in this area. And if you look to the north, you have where First Christian is. There's a park there at this point. And you know, later Railroad Square, or excuse me, earlier Railroad Square. But yeah, almost all those. Do you see Helen Haddad? You see the building that's the arched? So that's obviously still there. It's one of the few buildings that are still there. There's the A.T. Griffith building. It's not in here, but it's here. So then at this point, 1970s, all the buildings are gone. There's no outbuildings. Though again, if you look, it looks like there is, but that's from the ice plant next door. Okay. So then from there, I just want to talk about some of the upcoming events we have. I gotta plug it when I can. So we have Chuck Taylor Day. I know that Diane passed that around to you all. And that'll be held in parking lots around the museum. There's a lot of participating affiliated organizations. So it should be a really good day. And that's 3 to 8 on June 7th. Then we have Reeves Farm Jam. How many people have been to Reeves Festival? Been around since about 2007. This year we're changing it up a little bit. Last year we had our first farm jam, where we had several bands come out and perform. So we're kind of merging those, trying to do something a little different, seeing what seeing what we can do. And then from there, we've got, we announced the Talking Tombstones a few weeks ago, Talking Tombstones 2. So we'll be working with the Yellow Trail Museum in Hope to present that at Hope Meridian. Should be a really, really neat program. And, okay, any questions? I know I threw a lot of information.
So why did the Historical Society pick this house, right? How did the two things come together?
So initially, they looked at the jail, the original jail that was,
Yeah.
it's no longer there, but next to the courthouse.
Right.
Initially, they looked at that. I believe they looked at, there were 2 or 3 other buildings. Basically, the county told them they needed to get out of the basement of the courthouse. So they had 2 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's what they had to find from this.
Yep.
Okay.
But, okay, and then, oh, Tricia, I think you took it. There's that, that thing. Yeah, the evaluation. If you could just fill this out.
Eric
Right
has
there in the back.
We have golf pencils. How often do you get to use a golfing pencil?
So, if you'd be willing to fill that out, that'd be great. I want to thank Tricia, thank the library. This has been great. And we love to partner with you guys. And looking forward to your talk in August, Tricia.
Thanks, Sarah.